Buckle up, folks, because the political landscape of Britain is trembling under the weight of a seismic scandal that's rocking the very foundations of Keir Starmer's Labour Party. What was once a towering fortress of working-class dreams has crumbled into a pitiful pile of broken promises, betrayal, and outright humiliation. The Labour Party, led by the increasingly desperate Keir Starmer, is spiraling into an abyss of irrelevance, and the British people are cheering as it burns. The latest dagger to pierce Labour's bleeding heart? A jaw-dropping defeat in a council by-election that has left Starmer scrambling, sweating, and staring into the void of his own political demise. This isn't just a loss, it's a full-blown catastrophe, a neon sign flashing game over for a party that's lost its soul, its voters, and its grip on reality. But before we dive into this deliciously chaotic mess, let me hit you with something urgent. If you're loving this roller coaster of political drama, smash that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you don't want to miss a single second of this unfolding disaster. Every twist, every turn, every humiliating flop from Starmer's crumbling empire will be right here for you to devour. And drop a comment below. Tell me, do you think Labour's done for? Or is Starmer just one flip-flop away from a comeback? Your voice matters, and I need to hear it. Subscribe, comment, and join the revolution. We're exposing the truth together, one bombshell at a time. Now, let's get to the meat of this electrifying saga. Picture this: the Syon and Follock ward on Hounslow Council, a gritty patch of Britain that's been a Labour stronghold for as long as anyone can remember. This wasn't just a safe seat, it was Labour's beating heart, a sacred ground where red flags flew high and the working class spirit roared. But on this fateful day, March 9th, 2025, if you're keeping score, that heart stopped beating. Labour didn't just lose, they were publicly flogged, dragged through the mud, and left gasping for air as a former comrade-turned-traitor snatched victory from their trembling hands. Theo Denison, a name that will haunt Keir Starmer's nightmares for years to come, stormed onto the scene and claimed 33.5% of the vote, a razor-thin but devastating win. Labour, a pathetic 32.8%. And the Tories? Oh, they limped in with a measly 8.2%. Yes, I've corrected the obvious typo from your original. 88.2% was clearly a stretch. This wasn't just a defeat, it was a public execution of Labour's credibility, broadcast live for the world to see. Theo Denison isn't just some random upstart. Folks, he's the ghost of Labour's past come back to slit its throat. This guy was one of them. A Labour councillor who bled red until just last year, when he stormed out in a blaze of fury, fed up with the party's hypocrisy and Starmer's spineless leadership. And now, he's the prodigal son turned assassin, wielding a political machete and hacking away at Labour's rotting cops. With every speech, every fiery rant, Denison has branded Starmer a two-faced, spineless flip-flopper, a gutless chameleon who'll say anything, promise anything, to claw his way into power, only to abandon the common people the second he gets there. And the voters, they are eating it up. Denison's victory isn't just a win, it's a middle finger to Starmer, a roaring declaration that the British people are done with Labour's lies. Let's zoom out for a second, because this isn't an isolated disaster, it's the latest chapter in a horror story that's been unfolding ever since Labour slithered into power. By-election after by-election, Labour's been bleeding support like a sinking ship losing crew. The British people aren't just walking away, they are sprinting, screaming, and hurling Molotov cocktails at the party that swore to champion them. Why? Because Starmer's policies aren't just unpopular, they are a slap in the face to the very common people he claims to represent. Higher taxes, broken promises, and a smug elitism that reeks of Westminster privilege. These are the gifts Labour's bestowed upon a nation crying out for hope. And now, with Denison's triumph, the cracks in Starmer's facade are splitting wide open, exposing a panicked, flailing leader who's watching his empire collapse in real time. Imagine the scene in Labour HQ right now. Starmer pacing like a caged animal, sweat dripping down his forehead, advisors shouting over each other as the walls close in. This isn't just a by-election, it's a death knell. Sion and Follock was supposed to be untouchable, a fortress of Labour loyalty that no one could breach. And yet, here we are, watching Theo Denison, a man Labour once called brother, dance on their grave. The symbolism is almost too perfect. A former insider, a defector, a warrior who saw the rut within and chose to fight it instead of fester in it. His 33.5% might sound modest, but in this context, it's a thunderclap, a warning shot that echoes across Britain, whispering to every Labour MP, "You're next." And oh, how the mighty have fallen. Labour's been hemorrhaging seats in by-elections ever since they took power, each loss a fresh wound in a body already riddled with scars. The pattern's undeniable. The British people are fed up. They are not just disappointed, they are furious, betrayed by a party that promised the moon and delivered a landfill. Starmer's grand vision of a new Britain has morphed into a dystopian nightmare where the working class gets crushed under the weight of policies that serve the elite, not the everyman. Denison's win is the cherry on top, the ultimate proof that Labour's lost its way, and its voters. This isn't a blip, it's a reckoning. Let's talk about Starmer for a minute, shall we? The man's a walking disaster, a political Frankenstein stitched together from empty slogans and hollow charisma. He swept into power with a grin and a promise, vowing to be the savior of the downtrodden, the knight in shining armor for a Britain battered by years of Tory chaos. But what's he done? Flip-flopped like a fish on dry land. That's what. One day he's preaching unity and fairness. The next, he's cozying up to the establishment, leaving the common people to fend for themselves. Theo Denison's savage nickname, two-faced, spineless flip-flopper, isn't just a catchy jab, it's a diagnosis. Starmer's a man without a backbone, a puppet dangling on strings pulled by focus groups and corporate donors, and the British people have finally seen through the act. Denison, on the other hand, is a wildfire, a rebel with a cause who's tapped into the raw, pulsating anger of a nation scorned. When he ditched Labour last year, he didn't just walk away, he kicked the door down and set the house ablaze. Since then, he's been relentless, a one-man wrecking crew tearing into Starmer with a ferocity that's both terrifying and electrifying. Two-faced, he roars. Spineless, he bellows. A flip-flopper who'll say anything to get elected. And the crowds, they are roaring back, chanting his name, hoisting him up as the anti-Starmer, the voice of a people who've been lied to one too many times. His win in Sion and Follock isn't just a personal triumph. It's a rallying cry, a signal that the tide's turning and Labour's days are numbered. Now, let's break down the numbers, because they tell a story too wild to ignore. Denison's 33.5% might edge out Labour's 32.8% by a hair, but in political terms, it's a chasm. This was Labour's turf, their kingdom, and they let it slip through their fingers like sand. The Tories, bless their souls, could only muster 8.2%, a pitiful showing that proves they are not even in the game anymore. This wasn't a three-way fight, it was a duel between Labour and its own past, and Labour lost spectacularly. The voters didn't just choose Denison, they rejected Starmer, spat in his face, and sent a message that's reverberating through every corner of Britain. We're done with you. The shockwaves from this defeat are still rippling, and Labour's in full meltdown mode. Insiders whisper that Starmer's panicking, truly panicking, for the first time since he took the reins. He's seen the polls, he's watched the by-elections pile up like bodies in a war zone, and now he's staring down the barrel of a rebellion led by a man he once called an ally. The party's reeling, fractured, and bleeding out, and Starmer's got no one to blame but himself. His policies, those tone-deaf, elitist disasters, have alienated the very people he swore to protect. The common people aren't just unhappy, they are enraged, and they are taking their revenge one vote at a time. But this isn't just about one by-election. Folks, this is the beginning of the end. Labour's been on a losing streak that'd make even the most cursed sports team wince. By-election after by-election, they've watched their support evaporate, their strongholds fall, their legacy turn to ash. Sion and Fallock is just the latest domino to topple, but it's the most symbolic yet, a former Labour man beating them at their own game, in their own backyard. It's poetic, it's brutal, and it's a preview of the bloodbath to come. The British people have spoken, and their verdict is clear: Labour's finished. So where does this leave Keir Starmer? On the ropes. That's where. Dangling over the edge of a cliff with no one to pull him back. His party's in chaos, his voters are deserting him, and his enemies, both outside and within, are sharpening their knives. Theo Denison's win isn't just a loss. It's a humiliation, a spotlight on every flaw, every failure, every broken promise that's defined Starmer's reign. The man's a ghost already, haunting the halls of a party that's lost its purpose and its people. And Denison is the executioner, the harbinger of Labour's doom, a living reminder that betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from within. Let's not mince words. This is a disaster of biblical proportions. Labour's not just losing, it's imploding, collapsing under the weight of its own arrogance and incompetence. The British people aren't fools. They see through the spin, the lies, the flip-flopping facade of a leader who's all talk and no substance. Theo Denison's victory is more than a statistic. It's a revolution, a spark that could ignite a firestorm across the nation. Labour's strongholds are falling, their voters are fleeing, and their leaders panicking, and we're here for every glorious second of it. So, what's next? Will Starmer cling to power like a drowning man to a lifeboat? Or will he finally face the music and step aside? Can Labour salvage what's left of their tattered reputation? Or is this the death spiral they'll never escape? And what about Denison? Will he ride this wave of rage all the way to the top, a new king rising from Labour's ashes? The answers are coming, and they are going to be explosive. Stick with us, because this story's far from over, and it's only getting wilder. Before I let you go, hit that subscribe button one more time. I know you're hooked, and I promise you, the best is yet to come. Drop a comment below. Is Starmer toast? Or does he have one last trick up his sleeve? Let's get this conversation roaring. Your take could be the next big spark in this political inferno. See you in the next chapter of this unstoppable saga.